Give us free. Give us free.
Your Honor, please instruct the defendant that he cannot disrupt these proceedings with such outcome.
Give us free. Give us free.
If we are to have any semblance of order in this court,
Give us
peace, unity, and welcome my conscious and unconscious family and friends. This is the all-new Black Village Community Podcast, and I am truly your host of the show, JC, aka Afro Black, dropping nothing but the raw and uncut, without any fear, as I use my mic as a spear to chucker you with liberated truth. I am your host and your native soldier in the struggle. My purpose and mission for this show is first to enlighten, inform, and engage. And I want to engage with all who claim to know the truth. All truth seekers and my native family, I welcome you. This show is dedicated to all our indigenous native ancestors and to all those who've carried the mantle of truth, and to every person with the ability to throw off the chains of comfortable habit and unwarranted assumption and move in a new, liberated direction that is guided by truth and observational evidence, no matter where that direction may lead you. My main objective and purpose here is freedom, mind, soul, and spirit. That being said, welcome to the Black Village Community Podcast, and much love from our great universal goddess and mother of all, living here and above.
DC in the house.
Come whistles and pistols at nightfall. Bang on them for the lives that remain lost. Click back as the get back, new attitude for blacks. Got a bang for the way they treat us like animals. Police clapping beat us like animals. Police black with heaters to protect and to serve. Better know who your enemies are. Been too much talking, man. No talking. No more speeches, candles. No marching. No more grieving parents. No sharking. No more calls for peace. Let's spark it and ride on these pigs till the wheels fall off. Collide for our rights till we rise above. Ain't no time for no talking, let's chalk them off. Back them off as the show the call till they recognize. It's the night of a long night. 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 It's the night of a long night. Night of a long night. When we all come together, hope we don't collide. It's the night of a long night. 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 It's the night of a long night. Night of a long night. When we all come together, hope we don't collide.
Hey. This is JC, aka Afro Black, and I am here with you for another delicious Black Sunday to drop nothing but the raw and uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. And I am here. I am back. I am black and aboriginal, indigenously black. You feel me? To share with the indigenous conscious community another delicious Black Sunday. You feel me? So I am here to vibrate, to communicate, and to vibe with the people. You feel me? So we can give us something to think about. That's what I like to talk about things to just give us something to talk about, to think about, to verberate on. You feel me? And today is a continuation from last week's podcast topic, which is, and I quote, the lethargic left versus the radical right, part 2. Again, the lethargic left versus the radical right, part 2. The protest and presidential profess. You feel me? And so we're going to continue this thing from last week as we were talking about the politics of things. You feel me? And I think these are issues and things that, a lot of black people don't like to talk about, from the young to the old. You feel me? And it's because a lot of times you can't talk about the things you don't know about. You feel me? You can't really verberate on things you don't have a lot of knowledge and a lot of, roots or sources of information on. You feel me? And so as a result of that, as being uneducated on the politics of things, a lot of black people are disinterested or have no interest whatsoever in politics. And as a result, a lot of them make wrong decisions on political issues. And so we're going to talk about, the lethargic left. I want to talk about why did I choose the term the lethargic left, you feel me, for the Democrats. I'm pretty sure people can imagine why I chose the word the radical right. So let me change my vibe of music to give us something more laid back to verberate on. There we go. By Paris, Night of the Long Knives. Let me loop that in the backdrop. You feel me? Give us something to verberate on. So as we talk, as I was saying, a lot of black people are disinterested, or they lose interest. And the reason why is because these political representatives don't represent the black community. I'm speaking for the black community because I only can speak for the black community because I'm a black man and I was raised in the black community. I was raised in South Central Los Angeles, and I know what it is. You feel me? I know what's going on. As a result of that, as I was saying, black people, when they look at these political representatives, they don't see anybody that represents their interest. And when we talk about somebody representing our interest, and the fact that most political officials don't appear to represent our interest, the one person that had gained a lot of the black people's trust and interest, not everybody, I'm not saying that the majority of black people, but for the most part, rather if it was the majority or half the black community, the person that gained most of the black people's trust when it came to politics was Barack Obama. But he failed the black community at large. There's a fringe part of the black community, or a bourgeois part of the black community. They don't even consider themselves a part of the black community, who don't see that Barack Obama failed at anything. But in reality, Barack Obama failed the black community. He reached out to the poor and the middle class in the black community. And he did not do things in any part on the interest of black people whatsoever. Now let's look at what he did for the poor. Did he do anything in the interest of the poor? Because when it comes to the poor community, that entails white, black, and brown. When you look at the candidacy, when you look at the politics, when you look at the actions of Barack Obama, in my opinion, he did not even represent the interest of the poor community. So the question is, why do black people vote Democrat? Why do? I mean, you have a smart part of the black community that vote conservative, that vote Republican. But I'm going to talk about why I chose to use the term the lethargic left for the Democratic Party, and I'm going to tell you why. As well as I want to raise some questions and answer questions as well in reference to this part of the podcast of why I chose to use the term lethargic left for the Democratic Party. So let's start with why. Okay, my reason and purpose for the topic of lethargic left was for the serious reason of this. Last but delicious Black Sunday. Okay, I really didn't focus in on that, on the lethargic left and my reasons for this. But the reason why I chose this is because, and it's for one reason, and one of the most main reasons is due to the type of political behavior, actions permitted by Democrats towards the minorities and the black people in the urban communities in general. Again, One of the reasons why I chose the term lethargic left is due to the Democratic Party's the type of political behavior and actions that is permeated, or that is basically constantly recycled towards minorities and to black people in the urban communities in general. The Dems have always played thin-skinned, manipulative games of give and take, in my opinion. You know, when it comes to the relationship of the black community, Democrats have always, political officials and the Democratic Party itself has always played a thin-skinned game of manipulation, of give and take with the black community. Yet the black community is still loyal when it comes to voting, supporting Democratic issues and representatives. The Dems have always played, yet at the same time, let me say this, yet at the same time, the black community has very, very, very little political representation. So, in my opinion, they play on that. They play on the fact that black people's ignorance, black people still having in my opinion, an enslaved mindset of, instead of being leaders, they followers. Because who are they following? We're constantly following and emulating the white man. You feel me? So as I said, yet at the same time, we in the black community, the black community is constantly being used, in my conscious opinion, the black community is constantly being used, for example, when it comes to crime, the infestation of crime in the black communities. While always at the same time, the black community is being used as an example of crime infestation. You don't see them using the white community as an example of being infested by crime. Whenever these political officials want to talk about crime, the first thing they want to use as an example is the black urban community, our minority communities, our poor communities. So the first thing, especially young ambitious minorities that are trying to move into the area or the arena of politics, they fall victims, or they play the game to use their own communities as examples, as a political platform to get their foot into the door of politics. So year after year, you have black people, brown people, white people in the poor class, in the middle class, that are constantly listening to, if not their own so-called representatives, that means young, ambitious minorities who are moving in the area of politics, as well as out-of-touch white people, using black communities, using brown communities, using poor communities as a platform to get their foot into the door of politics when they first are starting to try to move up in the area of where, regardless if they're running for council, district council, if they're running for governor, if they're running for whatever office they're running for, they always use the poor community as an example. And yet at the same time, then they want to pander the black community for votes. So this is the reason why I chose to call the Democratic Party the lethargic left, because in contrast to this, what do they do for the black community? What do we get out of these officials? What do we get out of them? Now, I know last week I talked about Mr. Trump and his white supremacy rhetoric that came out of his mouth. But today I'm talking about, why did I choose to use the term lethargic left as an example for the Democratic Party in reference to the podcast topic? We all can imagine why I chose the word radical right. That's a common term, a common word of usage for the radical people within the Republican Party. But why did I choose to use the word lethargic left? And I'm pretty sure those who with some political intelligence, when they heard the term lethargic left, they understood why I chose it. But let me go into continue on why I chose to use it. Because when it comes to the minority communities themselves, the people themselves within the minority communities, what about the lack of housing, the lack of food and clean water in America? We're still having issues with clean water in America. Yet we got our military being used by political officials to go around the world and create clean water for other countries and generate food and teach people how to grow food. But yet we have an issue here in America. Detroit is a prime example of that. An issue with clean water. What did Barack Obama do when that issue a year ago went on, I believe it was in Detroit, with them purposely infiltrating a black community with high contents of lead and dirty water and rusty water running through their homes and running through their bathroom faucets. Children hadn't to sacrifice not taking baths in clean water. What did Barack Obama do? He did nothing. And he was at the time the former president. I mean, he was the president at the time. He did nothing. So as I said, we're still dealing with issues, and these representatives do not reflect the issues, do not reflect the faces, do not reflect the interest of the minority community. Barack Obama was supposed to cover that gaping hole where the black community don't get anything done on their behalf. But he didn't do that. As I said, at the same time, minority communities around this country, in America, from Detroit to Los Angeles to New York to Philly to Kansas to California, black people, brown people and black people, indigenous people are suffering. Aboriginal people are suffering. As I said, what I thought the Democrats were supposed to be the people's party. The Democrats were supposed to be the party for the middle class and the poor class and the struggling class, and they were supposed to get things done. What did Barack Obama do for 2 terms? Let alone, somebody may be saying right now, well, he ain't president no more. Well, we got somebody who's president right now, and he hasn't even been president a year. So you know what? The minority, black and brown community, the minority who's really the majority in this country, we know we can't look to him. He's already exposed that. You feel me? So, as I was saying, the Democratic Party, which claims to gives people the image of, insinuates through their rhetoric, insinuates through imagery that they are the party for the middle class. They're the party for the poor. They're the party for the struggling or hard-working man and woman of America. But they do not represent. They do not even take an interest. This is the reason why Hillary Clinton did not win by a landslide, let alone we know who chose not to choose her. We know who chose Mr. Trump to be president, and it wasn't the populace. But when you look at the votes, just the votes, when you look at the number of votes, and just in the populace, she didn't win by a landslide. And why? Because she did not give a damn about the vote or the interest of the black community. Hillary Clinton did not reach out to the black community. It wasn't until her candidacy was almost over that she made a decision to try to go out to some of these so-called black churches who she thought had her back. So, but at large, the black community did not endorse her. Why? Because she did not give a damn about black people being shot dead, unarmed black men and women and children being killed by serial killing racist cops. She didn't care. She didn't give a damn. She didn't want to touch the subject, just like Barack Obama stayed away from it. Yet these are Democrats. No, these are Democrats. I like that term. My wife says that. My wife says, no, they're Democrat. Just like the Republicans. Yes, they're Republicans because they can't do this and they can't do that. Yet the Republican also claim to be the party of everybody. And we already know that there's a fringe part of the Republican Party that is definitely, positively, absolutely, definitely have white nationalist views. Just like the Democratic Party. Yes, there are those within the Democratic Party that have white nationalist views. Why we should not wonder why. We should not wonder why the Democratic Party does not stand up against Trump. Because at large they do not. You got those here and there that do, but at large the Democratic Party is pretty much quiet as well. So, on this note, while I'm verbating, and I can continue to verbrate, let me play, and I got my brother here. If you got anything you want to say before I play some audio cast, brother, I got some audio cast I want to play, concerning this issue of Mr. Trump, and I got some audio class. I got an audio cast I want to play as well. That's going to speak to the history of the so-called parties making a shift change. Now, not everybody know this. Well, I'm not sure about those who are politically correct or politically informed about the history of politics know this. But there are a great number of people, in my opinion, in the black community who might not be aware of this, that in the 1960s, the Republican and Democratic Party made what is called a party shift change, where they changed parties. The Democrats became Republicans and Republicans became Democrats. That's what they say. That's what they want us to believe. But is that true? Is there any truth to that? That's the question. I got some information I want to play on that as well. But before I go into any audio cast, I got my brother here. Brother Curtis, you got anything you want to say before I go any further, brother? Or you just want to continue to listen in?
Well, I think this is going to be interesting. There's one thing I want to say is that as far as what's going on, all this focus on Trump and what he's doing and everything, people need to realize that all that is a smokescreen to keep our minds off of a hidden agenda, whatever that hidden agenda may be. But we know there's one because there's always one. And
when you say hidden agenda, when you say hidden agenda, you got to be a little bit more specific, because a hidden agenda can mean anything, everything. What do you mean by hidden agenda?
Well, there's something that's going on in the politics that is undercover and is if it's spoken of not front page, but in the small little section way over in the corner that hardly anybody ever reads.
Okay.
That's what I mean. There's an agenda going on which is on the down low. And, this whole thing that people are focusing on Trump and what he's doing is just a smoke screen. So, we don't pay attention about anything else because we got our mind on him.
Well, he is the president of the United States, and he is the figurehead and the image of the free world. So, aren't we supposed to pay attention to him? Aren't we supposed to pay attention to him?
Well, yes, you're supposed to pay attention to what's going on with him, but in reality, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I know you will. As far as I know, all I see, the only thing I really can say about him is he's been talking a whole lot, saying a whole lot, and people are just upset about what he is saying.
Well, shouldn't they be upset about what he's saying? I mean, he's the president of the United States.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is this. He's talking a whole bunch of mess, okay? But behind that, under that mess that he's talking, there's something else that's going on that should be looked at. But because nobody's bringing those hidden things forward, you know, we're not seeing nothing. We just focus on what he has said.
Well,
what is he doing that we don't know about?
Okay. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things going on that we don't know about. I mean, prime example. I mean, he made a good point when he talked about giving away strategic information, military-wise, over the news. Why should we let the enemies know what we're doing? Now, in reference to America, you got to realize America's a melting pot. I mean, we got people over here who are Americans, and we got people over here who are disguised as Americans, but they're not Americans. So as the president, and you know, also you got to take into consideration him being a white man, that means he takes things to the extreme. What do you mean that he's hiding things? I mean, what should we be knowing about that we don't know about in your view?
Well, I can't bring up anything specific. It's like this place where the white folks had that little rally at, okay, and the way he spoke on that, you know, there's people that speaks on that he has spoken in code, and that the people that understand the code knows what he's talking about. You know, if he's a white supremacist, you know, he didn't condone what he didn't criticize the violence that was at that rally. He didn't criticize the people who did that violence. You know, there's something within his whole statement. Oh, shoot. Something within his whole statement that is spoken undercover.
Well,
right?
look,
some people say spoken in code.
Well, the information that people got from the way he gave his speech, or you know, or whatever you want to call the way he spoke out about the protests in Charlottesville, it was basically it was nothing code. It was basically he was supporting white nationalists. There was nothing cold about that. When you try to equalize something, yet there's nothing to equalize, because the group that was out there, the people that was out there perpetrating the protest, the ones who we said had a permit, these guys represented white nationalists and white supremacist views. That in itself is violence. White supremacy does not have a history of being nonviolent. Now, and so he was supporting that. So there was nothing coldish about that. That was very obvious and overt. The point is this, and this is what I think you might be speaking to. Since we know, and he has not denounced himself as a person that don't have white nationalist views, because this thing has gotten down to a point when it comes to him, down to the details. People are talking about the alt-right, people are talking about white supremacists, people are talking about neo-Nazis, and all these different groups have different ideologies, yet they have commonalities. And what I mean by different ideologies, well, the neo-Nazis are extremists. White nationalists have extremist views, but they believe in toning down those views and coming across in a more intellectual, intelligent way, so that they can sit in the mainstream with everybody else. Well, neo-Nazis don't care about sitting down with everybody else, because they don't want to sit down with everybody else. But the alt-right, which is the modern day conservative, can have white supremacist views or white nationalist views, but he keep those personal preferences to himself and operate within the public eye as no different than any other average politician. So this is a thing that people are really not talking about when it comes down to putting things in their perspective. Do you feel where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
I mean, because if you put things in their perspective, like they should be, then we can ignore the neo-Nazi, okay? Because to me, the person to really pay attention to, the people to really focus in on is the group who call themselves the alt-right. That's the people that the media, and then the media are not paying attention to the alt-right. They'll mention the alt-right here and there. They'll mention the word white nationalist here and there, but they won't get down to specifics on the differences between these groups, the differences between neo-Nazis, the differences between skinheads, and the differences between those who they call the alt-right. You feel me? And so, on that note, go ahead.
Right, now, the alt-right, at this moment, I'm not hip on what the alt-right is. So can you kind of explain that a little bit?
Okay, well, I can give you the definition of the alt-right, and in the process give you my perspective on it. Okay, the alt-right itself, the term, was an invented movement that describes the term alt-right to invent. Excuse me. Let me get my tongue is twisting. All right. Let me go down here. All right. The group that's the alt-right is a term, okay, which is actually in my opinion, it's more of a modern term. It's not really new. It's only new to those who didn't know nothing about it. But the alt-right, which by definition, and this is a definition I pulled out of encyclopedia, the alt-right or alternative right is a loosely defined group of people with far-right ideologies who reject the mainstream conservatism in favor of white nationalism, principally in the United States, but also to a lesser degree in Canada, Europe, and across the world, where first persons, a guy by the name of Paul Gottfried was the first person to use the term alternative right when referring specifically to a development within the American right-wing politics. In 2008, the term has since gained wide currency with the rise of the so-called alt-right white supremacist Richard Spencer coined the term in 2010 in reference to a movement centered on white nationalism, and did so according to the Associated Press to disguise over terms of racism and white supremacy and neo-Nazism. Exactly. So the alt-right is basically those within the white supremacist movement who want to disguise themselves. They want to disguise themselves as a mainstream conservatism, because that's what the definition says. The definition says the alt-right or alternative right is loosely defined group of people with far-right ideologies who reject the mainstream conservatism in favor of white nationalism, principally in the United States. There you go. And so, you understand now where the alt-right means? Hello, Brother Currington, are you still there? Okay, look like he kind of left the conference room. But I'm going to continue with this podcast. Anybody who heard that, you heard the definition. You can go look up this definition yourself. You can find this. Just look up alt-right and you can find out what the term alt-right means. Okay, so let me continue.
Okay, I got it.
Oh, so did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard it. I had put myself on mute and forgot.
Okay, I don't want to focus too much on the alt-right, because the alt-right is basically, like I said, it's basically the white supremacist with a intelligent, educated disguise. You feel me?
Right.
Okay. I want to focus.
Right.
I want to focus.
They're fake people on the right.
Well, they're more of an educated white supremacist. That's all an alt-right is an educated white supremacist who's trying to disguise himself as a mainstream conservative when he's really a conservative with white nationalist views. And see, we live in a country. Yeah. We live in a country that is the melting pot of the world. We cannot jeopardize our democracy. We cannot jeopardize our country and our government because we got people with fascist with fascist views, because white supremacists are fascists. They only want to reach out and to benefit one part of the society rather than everybody within our society. You feel me?
Right.
Okay, so let me continue with this podcast. I want to focus in mostly on the lethargic left, because when you talk about the right wing, it's really sad. I want you to know, in my opinion, Brother Currington, the Democratic Party did its best to make the right wing look like the party of white supremacists, when the Democratic Party has just as many white supremacists as the Republican Party. In my opinion, they both were put together by the same group of people. and the Democratic Party, starting in the South, having its birth in the South, we know was full of nothing but white supremacists, because the Democratic Party did not want the Republican Party to succeed. You feel me? So let me play some audio cast and stimulate some conversation, and we'll take it from there. So I'm going to play an audio cast right here to get things going and just get this conversation going. And we shall continue this podcast topic, which is the lethargic left versus the radical right.
When you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at Excuse me. What about the alt-left, left, that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
Now, you heard Donald Trump right there. You heard him right there trying to justify white nationalists. What about the alt-left? You define, challenging the reporter. Define to me what is an alt-right. He know exactly what the alternative right is, because he's a part of the group. So the question is the alt-right any different than the alt-left? Huh? That's the question. Is there any difference between the two parties? Let's continue this audio cast, and we will continue our discussion on this matter.
When you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt? Not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So,
audio cast by Donald Trump. I put in the wrong audio cast. I played the wrong audio cast for that moment, but I got the right one in right now. But the question is, as you heard Donald Trump defending white nationalists, the question is this: is the Democratic Party any different? We have a president in office right now who defends white nationalists, who has white nationalist views. Very obvious. And when he's off script, you can see his personal views. When he's on script, you can see that he's being fake and phony. But is the Democratic Party any different? Why aren't they standing up against white supremacy, the Democratic Party? Why? Well, do they have a history with white supremacy? Do the Democratic Party has a history with white supremacy? Is the Democratic Party's hands just as dirty or more dirty than the Republican Party? Is there any really difference in their ideology, the core of their ideology and the core of their mission and agenda? Well, let me play this audio cast right here, and we shall continue and see.
Once upon a time, every student of history, and that meant pretty much everyone with a high school education, knew this. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery and Jim Crow, and the Republican Party was the party of emancipation and racial integration. Democrats were the Confederacy and Republicans were the Union. Jim Crow Democrats were dominant in the South and socially tolerant Republicans were dominant in the North. But then, in the 1960s and 70s, everything supposedly flipped. Suddenly, the Republicans became the racists and the Democrats became the champions of civil rights. Fabricated by left-leaning academic elites and journalists, the story went like this. Republicans couldn't win a national election by appealing to the better nature of the country. They could only win by appealing to the worst. Attributed to Richard Nixon, the media's all-purpose bad guy, this came to be known as the Southern Strategy. It was very simple. Win elections by winning the South. And to win the South, appeal to racists. So the Republicans, the party of Lincoln, were to now be labeled the party of rednecks. But this story of the two parties switching identities is a myth. In fact, it's three myths wrapped into one false narrative.
There you go. That's one part. I got a part two I'm going to play in just a few. But you heard her. She said that starting early on, the Republican Party was appealing to the South, appealing to white nationalists. This gave room and an okay for them to join their group. You heard her say that. And originally, the Republican Party was a party for the people. And that makes sense because the Republican Party represented the Union. But did they really? But did the Republican Party really represent the Union? The Union of who? The Union of the people? The Union of the states? The Union of a core interest? See? The question is, do these parties represent the black community? Because everybody in this country has to have a common, some type of a common interest or a common goal or a common. Do both parties have the people's interest? And what people I'm talking about? The common people. What common people I'm talking about? The populace. And what is the populace? The poor and the middle class. The poor, the struggling, and the middle class. You feel me? That's the question. So let me continue on and play this next part of this. And wait a minute, let me see if my brother got something. Brother, you heard the first track. What do you have to say?
Now, which one are you referring to?
Didn't you hear the track that I just got them playing about how the Democratic Party was the party? Well, let me play this again because you obviously missed. Let me play it.
Yeah, I heard the track, but there was a couple before that you played also.
Well, I'm talking about this last track right here.
Which one were you referring?
I'm referring to this last track right here.
The last one?
Mm-hmm.
Once upon a time.
Yeah, I've heard that story. You know how the Democrats were supposed to switch to the Republicans and the Republicans switched to the Democrats. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, that doesn't matter because I think and I believe that the main agenda that's been reached for is the same with both parties, is that they're just going about it at different angles and keeping the people confused in the process.
Okay, I can agree with that. I can totally agree with that. That obviously that both parties have a core agenda, and that's a common that agenda is the same agenda. Both parties have a core agenda. Now, and everything else around it is just basically, a game. It's just an illusion. It's just to keep everybody going. I can agree with that. But what about parties like the Independent Party and the Greenpeace Party? Because we can agree, and I agree. At least me and you, we came to the same conclusion that the Democratic Party is really not a party for the minority. It doesn't represent minority interests. I mean, Barack Obama is a prime raw and uncut example of that. He did nothing for the commoner. He did nothing for the poor. He did nothing for black people in specific, and him being a black man, he should be ashamed of that. Him having 2 black daughters and a black wife, they all should be ashamed of their father in that area. Knowing the fact of that black people have always been at the bottom of the totem pole throughout history in this country, yet this country was built on the backs of our people, blood, sweat, and tears, and their labor. Free labor is what actually built this country, gave this country its financial foundation to even get started. You feel me? So just looking at the fact, looking at the fact,
what Obama did do for the black folks, he did one thing I could say, and that one thing I just thought of while we were talking. He gave black folks the illusion that they can become, as he, president. You know,
I don't. You know what? I think in the beginning. I think in the beginning of his presidency, let me say this. In reference to what you just said, I can agree with that during his candidacy and when he became president the first 2 years. I think after the last 2 years of his first term as president, black people, young and old, stopped. They didn't feel that way about him no more. They saw that he was really just the face of black people, but the agenda was the same. The mission was the same. You feel me? He did nothing to keep young black people feeling positive, in my opinion, about taking the seat or taking the office of presidency.
Well, from the people that I've heard and hear, you know, they got that mindset, oh, we can become president now.
Yeah, of course they would have that mindset. Of course they got that mindset. But you know what? Barack Obama did not represent the black community. He didn't even represent the middle class black community. He represented the face of white America. He fought their wars. You feel me? He gave them the health plan that they wanted us to have, which was basically just an expansion. It was just an expanded form of Medi-Cal. It was. Go ahead, my brother.
JC. Let's get off Obama.
Well, he's a part of the podcast topic. Due to the fact that it's called the Lethargic, today's podcast is about why did I choose the term lethargic left? Obama is a part of that lethargic left. He did very little, if any at all, for the poor and the black and brown community. Yet, he had the face of the brown and black and brown face. He had a black and brown face, but his agenda was not for black and brown people. You know, he also, let me say this about him too. He also cemented through federal law, changing anybody in this country. Now if you are an African American, despite the fact of what you say you are, because the federal government say you're an African American. He changed all federal documentation from Negro, from colored to African. So Barack Obama didn't do nothing for black people. He didn't do nothing for black people, man. He did some things that was in the interest of what he considered in the interest of the country. Well, the so-called expanding the tax credit for those at the end of the year when you pay your taxes and apply for tax credits and stuff of that nature. And he created the so-called tax credit and home. Help people keep their homes. People were losing their homes due to the mortgage meltdown, and he did some democratic things that I would consider just the norm of the Democratic Party. But when he came to doing anything specific, when it came to helping black people with their identity and black people joining Indian reservations by helping us with our history and putting together our history and our identity, he did nothing. So on that note, let me play this second part to the first part of the audio cast that you just last heard. I want to play that to continue to stimulate discussion on this podcast subject, which is our podcast title, which is the lethargic left versus the radical right. But in specific, we're talking about why I chose the term lethargic left to speak as a label for the Democratic Party, and we shall return after this.
Let's take a brief look at each myth in turn. Myth number 1. In order to be competitive in the South, Republicans started to pander to white racists in the 1960s. Fact, Republicans actually became competitive in the South as early as 1928, when Republican Herbert Hoover won over 47% of the South's popular vote against Democrat Al Smith. In 1952, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower won the southern states of Tennessee, Florida, and Virginia. And in 1956, he picked up Louisiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia too. And that was after he supported the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education that desegregated public schools, and after he sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock Central High School to enforce integration. Myth number 2. Southern Democrats, angry with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, switched parties. Fact, of the 21 Democratic senators who opposed the Civil Rights Act, just one became a Republican. The other 20 continued to be elected as Democrats or were replaced by other Democrats. On average, those 20 seats didn't go Republican for another 2.5 decades. Myth number 3. Since the implementation of the Southern strategy, the Republicans have dominated the South. Fact, Richard Nixon, the man who is often credited with creating the Southern strategy, lost the Deep South in 1968. In contrast, Democrat Jimmy Carter nearly swept the region in 1976, 12 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in 1992, over 28 years later, Democrat Bill Clinton won Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The truth is, Republicans didn't hold a majority of Southern congressional seats until 1994, 30 years after the Civil Rights Act. As Kevin Williamson of National Review writes, if Southern rednecks ditched the Democrats because of a civil rights law passed in 1964, it is strange that they waited until the late 1980s and early 1990s to do so. They say things move slower in the South, but not that slow. So what really happened? Why does the South now vote overwhelmingly Republican? Because the South itself has changed. Its values have changed. The racism that once defined it doesn't anymore. Its values today are conservative ones, pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-small government. And here's the proof. Southern whites are far more likely to vote for a black conservative like Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina than a white liberal. In short, history has moved on. Like other regions of the country, the South votes values, not skin color. The myth of the Southern strategy is just the Democrats' excuse for losing the South, and yet another way to smear Republicans with the label racist. Don't buy it. I'm Carol Swain, professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University.
There you go. You heard it, my brother. You heard it. She broke down some good information, in my opinion. I mean, she said some stuff that raised some questions, and she also said some things that answered some questions. What would you say to what you just heard?
Well, you know, really, I want to know what you say. You are saying that she is saying.
Well, let me answer that. I'm glad you said that. That's all I needed to hear to get me to walk through the door, my brother. When she talks about the fact that she says that about the shift change between the Republican and Democratic Party that happened in the 1960s, and she claims that you got those that say that that this Republican, I think she said Hoover, I believe, was that he was pandering to racists. She said that's what the Democrats were doing, but she said that the Republicans were doing this. But then she uses to firm her foundation by saying that only one Republican from the Democratic Party did a shift change. The rest of the Democrats, the Southern Democrats, stayed in the Democratic Party. They didn't leave at all. She said if there was really a shift change, why did only one Republican move to the Democrats? Only one Republican left the Republican Party and moved over. I mean, only one left. The rest, she said, the core of the Democrats stayed the way they were during the 60s.
Okay, was that? Just see, the one that left, wasn't that a Democrat that left the Democratic Party and went to the Republican Party?
Well, let me make sure I got it right.
Won the southern states of Tennessee, Florida, and Virginia. And in 1956, he picked up Louisiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia, too. And that was after he supported the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education.
Well, she's talking right here. She's talking about the Republic. She's talking about, she's giving, and actually on top of that, she makes a good point about also during the 60s. The Republicans are the ones who voted mostly on the civil rights things that helped move those things along. Whereas a lot of the Democrats during those times in the 60s and 50s was voting against civil rights initiatives to help black people. So she makes some good points.
Okay, I want you to stop right there for a moment.
Go ahead.
Because
but I also want you to know, I'm not.
Maybe a lot of other people don't have.
Let me listen to it. I also want you to know, I'm not trying to give any credibility. I'm not trying to give any credibility to the Republican Party. The point is that they both smear each other. Both parties smear each other. Both parties join each other, and that just validifies the point that there's no difference between both the parties. Okay, so my point is to point out the fact that there is really no difference between the Republican and the Democratic Party. They play games with political missions, agendas, and policies and laws. They play games with jumping back and forth on each other's party. One gets tired of one and goes join his party. The other one gets tired of his and they join his party. So there's no different in the parties. It's black people, us, who need to wake up, and that we need to create a party that represents a party for the people. The last time something like that happened, we had issues though, and that was the Black Panther Party. They was a party that represented the ideology, the mission, the policy that really needed to be implemented to help build communities. That's who the Black Panther Party represented. And it's very understood that the Black Panther Party was a threat to white nationalism, and also just government ideology in general, because they were really for building the community, the Black Panther Party. When you look at what they were doing, Bobby Seals and U.P. Newton, and what they were doing to help the community, they were educating the community on information. That was one of the first things they did, was to educate black people about their rights and interaction with local police and law enforcement, how to conduct yourselves and what your rights were, and the things that you could deny them and not tell them are what you should tell them. They gave that information out to people in the communities, and that was one of the first things they did. And so basically that's my stand on, my brother. Go ahead, let me hear what you got to say. Well, at this moment, I'm going to reserve my right to say anything. So yeah, my point of playing that information was not to validate the Republican Party. It was to prove the fact that, yes, there is a history there. There is some facts and there is some fiction there. Just like when she talks about the part of the audio cast right here in the very beginning of the audio cast, and she talks about a Republican who was running for office, and she says that the Democrats are basically saying that he was pandering to white supremacists. Well, she doesn't deny that. When you listen to this, let me just play this right quick again.
In turn, myth number one: in order to be competitive in the South, Republicans started to pander to white racists in the 1960s. Fact: Republicans actually became competitive in the South as early as 1928, when Republican Herbert Hoover won over 47% of the South's popular vote against Democrat Al Smith. In 1952, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower.
Now, if you notice, and I'm stopping the audio, but because she doesn't deny that he was pandering to white supremacy. She doesn't deny that. She just says it's a myth. She says it's a myth. She didn't say she said what he actually did. He gained. Well, how did he gain it? One of the things we know that a part of being a politician when you're running for office is that you pander to groups. Whatever you need to do, in some cases, depending on the politician, depending on the moral standards or the moral limitations of that politician, you pander to whoever group you want to pander to gain votes. And in some cases, if you share the agenda of that group that you're pandering to, when you get in office, you end up doing things in that direction of that group. So she doesn't deny that. So I don't, you have to listen to what she's saying. But then she put in some facts that I do agree with. And when she talks about the fact that Democrats, if you listen to the whole audio cast, she talks about how all they did was try to smear Republicans and make them look like they were a group of racists. And no, the Republican Party itself is not a group of racists. You've had matter of fact, black people, the first people to join a party, the first party they joined was the Republican Party, who supported they were the ones who were supporting bringing black people into politics as far as back as in the early 1828, when you had the first group of black politicians. So go ahead, my brother.
I need to ask you a personal question. Have you changed your view on the Republican Party?
No, I haven't changed my view on the Republican Party. Brother, I've always been and I always will be a man of truth. So regardless if you're talking about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, I look for truth. And so it's a historical and a truthful fact that the first people, when black people first entered politics in this country, the group that supported black people joining politics was the Republican Party. That's not my justifying them as a party, and that's not me agreeing with their politics. I don't agree with their politics, and I don't agree with them as a party because their agenda and their mission is not a party for the black community. And neither one of the parties, regardless if it's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Independent Party, the Libertarian Party, neither one of those parties are for the best interest of indigenous Aboriginal people. They've done nothing to aid or to help black people regain their cultural Aboriginal identity. So my point is that we as a people need to have our own party. We need to have our own party, man, our own indigenous Aboriginal party. You feel me? And so that's just my opinion. You feel me? But, regardless of all that, the first thing that's really important is black people being educated about the history of Aboriginal indigenous history, because that history has been buried. A lot of times that history has been distorted or has been left out, manipulated, and that's to me that's really important. That's a part of the black history. Another thing that when it comes to these groups, when it comes to Democratic Party or the Republican Party, when it comes to really repairing the indigenous Aboriginal people, our community, our culture, our history, our spirituality, like I say, they don't represent us. None of those parties represent our interest, our best interest at large at all. So what would you have to say about that, my brother? What do you think?
Well, I've always said that, the parties weren't for us, because I've been a Democrat, I've been a Republican, but neither one of those parties have done anything to further the agenda of black people.
No, exactly.
Black folks in America.
I totally agree.
I
totally agree.
You vote. The people that goes in there. What have they done? We've gotten, baby steps, in moving up the ladder, and we've been taking baby steps ever since the beginning of our so-called freedom.
That's true. That's true. Yep, that's true. And when you had groups like the Black Panther Party that was saying, forget the little steps, I want to take big steps. See, they were taking big steps to make big change. I mean,
they got shut down quick.
Exactly, because of those big steps. Prime example, one big step. They had their own breakfast program when there was no breakfast programs in the poor black communities in the 1960s. There was no breakfast. Starting in the 1960s, that's when the Black Panther Party people came around. They evolved in the 60s. So there was no breakfast program, but the Black Panther Party had a breakfast program feeding the children breakfast in the morning. And then eventually they had a lunch program as well. And eventually this ended up being implemented in the school system. But my point, they had the first free clinic, the free clinic program. The Black Panther Party put together the first free clinic program in the poor black communities. And so later on, the government tried to, they tried to emulate that as well, where they had free clinic programs. The government was behind it. So my point being is that if we can make big strides like that, and it was started by 3 young brothers, you feel me? 3 young brothers, Huey Newton, Bobby Seals, and I believe it was Geronimo Pratt. I'm not sure if he was a founding member, but it was 3. It started with 3 brothers, ended up being growing into 4 brothers. It was a group, a handful of those brothers at Berkeley, at the University of Berkeley of California, where they started the Black Panther Party. And let's not forget, may he rest in peace, brother, I believe his name, David Okoye, who was the one that he was Japanese, and he was also a University Berkeley member, and he helped with founding the Black Panther Party. You got people out there trying to smear that brother, but I believe it was David Okoye or John Okoye. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Okoye. But so yeah, man, if we, there was some young brothers who put together the Black Panther Party. They were college. They started out on the college university level. You feel me? Young brothers, and grew it into something. And Bobby Seals is still talking. Matter of fact, talking about Bobby Seals, I want to end my podcast. I got something right here with brother Bobby Seals talking about what his thoughts about like Black Lives Matter and what's going on today in reference to the Black Panther Party. And I want you to know the Black Panther Party was considered, or at least the government labeled them, an extremist leftist wing group is what they're labeled in history as. So let me play this audio cast, and then we shall continue before our show. My show is actually over, but I must play this right quick by brother Bobby Seals. He's much older, he's old man now, but he still got that Black Panther flavor that that if you remember Bobby Seals, if you ever heard Bobby Seals back in the 60s giving speeches. So check this out.
See, I don't like to use derogatory terms. We took no crap, so to speak, from what we used to say, the racist pig power structure. Now, it was, when we say a pig, that meant fascist. You know what I mean? That's all it meant. Oh, you hate police? We hate fascists. If the police are acting fascist, the politicians are acting like fascists, you want to repress votes or repress rights, etc., you're fascist. And they're going to attack us, and we're going to have to defend ourselves, and we're going to have political courtroom cases, etc. And that's what they did, particularly in the year of 1969. Sure, it makes me sad to the extent that what has happened is that these right-wing, racist politicians of one kind and one ilk and one framework or another, with their little ALEC programs of lobbying state legislatures, put these laws in, stand your ground and all this kind of crap, you know what I mean? And at the same time, privately and behind the scene, build up militarized police force frameworks. You know what I mean? All to do what? To suppress constitutional, democratic, civil, human rights. That's fascism. This is what they're doing. A lot of things did change, but they turned right around and they restructured stuff. Legislative-wise and political-wise. And then young folks in these Black Lives Movement, you got to make sure that you hang tough and organize in your communities for these localized city council seats and or get referendums to the ballot, good research committees, etc., and boom, 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 and drive. There should be a community that says we want community control of police. Somebody needs to help, and I would love to help them design it. Because we designed one time, right, in Berkeley, California, and we lost only about 1 percentage point. You know, that's the 60s as it's connected with the present day. It's still a necessity. The 60s as it's connected with the present day. It's still a necessity. Still a necessity.
There you go, right there. That's Bobby Seale, man. Brother Bobby Seale, that brother. Old man Bobby Seale, but that's still Bobby Seale. And you can hear you talking about commenting on giving some little words of wisdom to Black Lives Matter organized group and his thoughts on that, and you know, so and you see his commenting on, he still brother know the system. The brother know the system, you know, telling them, giving them advice on how to organize. You feel me? So the Black Panther Party was definitely a very strong at one time organized, and they should have been able to build on that, even though they organization was, you know, put to basically destroyed, and they locked the brothers up and killed a lot of the Black Panther Party members and leaders. You know, those who was still left around should have been able to organize, or at least organize groups like Black Lives Matter. Should have looked to some of them old brothers on thoughts and getting their thoughts on how to put things together and how to organize. You feel me? So I gotta go, but I definitely will be back in black. My brother, any last words you want to give, my brother, before we head up out of here? Or anything you want to say about what you just, anything you want to comment on what you just heard before we go? You feel me? That was Bobby Seals right there. I just had to play that. That was just recent. That was a recent interview with Bobby Seals.
I think I'm gonna close with this. You know, we need to realize that every time we took a big giant step, they was there to block it and to push us back. You know, and that pushing back also affects us mentally, even if we don't know it.
That's true.
But it has. You know, because one, we are so divided that we're scared to come together. You know, if there's anything that's a sign of struggle, we're scared of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth in what you just said. A lot of truth. It's sad truth too, because one of the saddest truths in what you're saying, what I'm getting out of what you're saying, is also how quick we are and how easily we are to hurt one another, and how quick we are to run from a situation to protect one another and stick to, you know, because for you to protect one another, you got to have a sense of unity to stick together. You feel me? Because protecting one another, that's a sacrifice. You feel me?
Yeah, and what you said is true. We can easily tear each other apart, but when it comes to fixing somebody up, you know, we are skeptical about doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I was sharing.
It don't cost us too much.
I was sharing that insight with a brother of mine. You know, a little brother of mine. I was like, look, man, because he know about the streets of being little young thugs out in the streets. I said the sad thing about it, young thug brothers will run towards shooting their own brother, but then if the police is chasing them and shooting them, they'll run and drop their gun and scared to shoot at the police and get shot all up in the back.
Right.
so you know, man, you know.
Ain't that nothing?
Yeah, I mean, come on, man. Cowardice.
You shoot at your brother, you know, your brother, and you shooting at each other, but the police come, instead of y'all shooting at the police, y'all running.
Exactly. Yeah. And the police will start shooting at them first. So, you know, that's what I tell my brother.
Oh, no, the police don't even have to start shooting. All they got to do is come.
So, I mean, it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing. I was telling my brother, I said, these brothers.
They don't see them and start running.
And I said, and these brothers want to call themselves thugs. You're a thug, but you'll run from the police, but run towards killing your brother. So, I don't know, man. You know, when it comes to unity, like I say, it's going to take a generation leaving and a new generation coming in. It's going to take us also building our women up. Our women have to be rose up, have to raise up. Our women have to embrace their cultural truth. You know, right now we got our people still taking on a false identity of African and African American. Ain't never been to Africa, ain't got no African family members, ain't got a connection to Africa, but then wearing African ideology with an African, you know, running around every year celebrating African festivities because they're being told by the system that they are African. You feel me? And so that has to change too. That mentality, that mindset has to change. We have to look to ourselves, look to the truth of the culture of ourselves. And you know, if you know you born here in America, your mama born here in America, your daddy was born here in America, your grandparents are from America, and your great-grandparents are from America, you are an indigenous, aboriginal American if you got melanated skin. That's who you are. You know, so now if you white and you got great-grandparents here, they still immigrated over here. So we already know what's up with that. So on the Raw and Uncut, you know, that's all I got to say. Any last words, bro, before we go?
No, it was a good podcast.
Well, I enjoyed myself. I always enjoy myself, especially when my brother joined me and we give us, you know, something to verberate on. But we will be back. Definitely be black, dropping nothing but the Raw and Uncut here on the Black Village Community Podcast. You can always join me. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a bit of your conscious time. You can join me and call in at 855-445-9340. You can also chime in at 857-232-0155. And don't forget the conference key to get through the conference door and sit here at the conference table of truth with me, JC aka Afro Black, which is 947595. I gotta go. But as always say, I love chicken, so love, peace, and chicken grease. And may the great mother bring us together under the wings of her peace. I gotta go. Yakoki to all my Aboriginal people. Much love. I'm out.
Night of a long night. It's the night of a long night. When we all come together, hope we don't collide. One black man's killed every 28 hours by pigs in these fake vigilante cowards, claiming they scared only after they profile us and beat us or worse, so we hit back first. Set it off with a Molotov homemade charge. Black when the strap cough, cap the sword. Can't trust, so we bust on officers. Now they calling all cars suspects at large, so we blast first, then we ask questions last. Do like they do, mob and mash. Do like they do, ain't no pass, no stop, no trip, just slap that ass. Cause we say gunplay's only thing that works. Squeeze, retreat in gorilla spurts. Do a drive-by, clap and squirt. From the rooftop, shoot, nigga, put it work. Because the only language America speaks is violence. The only language America understands is violence. So let's talk.